Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you to Ambassador Kim for being here with us at the room. And thank you to all these wonderful speakers, DG Azuley and all of the leaders that joined us in the first panel. It's really exciting to have all these voices joining together in the fight against racism and discrimination. And I want to repeat it again. We are here thanks to the very strong leadership of the Republic of Korea and all the member states of UNESCO that signed this global call against racism, and also call on UNESCO to develop a roadmap that will be commensurate to the fight that we are trying to lead today. It was this global call adopted at the Executive Board and the mandate that member states provided to UNESCO on developing this anti-racist roadmap that brought us today. The framing could not be better with the high-level speakers, as I mentioned, and the very important messages that they delivered. COVID-19 is a massive, massive wake-up call. Given the health, social, and economic vulnerabilities that have resulted in higher costs from the pandemic, in the context of increasing inequalities of income and opportunity all around the world. This higher cost, as we have heard, is not equally distributed, as it depends on the capacities of people and communities to wave the pandemic. The inequalities of COVID-19 have mirrored the inequalities that we see in our societies more generally, those driven by discrimination on the grounds of gender, on the grounds of class, location, occupation, citizenship status, and most starkly, by race and ethnicity. COVID is just a mirror, but we don't like what we see in that mirror, and thus we want to change it. The uncomfortable truth is that racism worsened COVID outcomes, and COVID is also worsening racism. This is the vicious cycle that we want to break. We know that Afro-descendant or Latinos in the US face 2 or 3 times higher risk than white Americans on being sick or dying due to higher comorbidities or socioeconomic background. It comes together. We know that migrants and people of migrant origin are usually less equipped to weigh the impact of the pandemic, and their children less so in navigating the school closures. And I'm very glad that we have here ADG's Giannini, who is leading the education work. We know that besides the health and economic impact, globally, more female jobs are lost than those of men, and on top, women have to cope with the question of violence at home in the hands of an intimate partner. And that's why we decided that in this forum, we cannot not have a very important panel on gender issues. Racism emerged all over the world with different manifestations. Shocking trends show now the increased aggressions to people of Asian origin, and we should stop this. We should stop this. I think this is what we have heard. Ladies and gentlemen, racism doesn't just hurt those directly affected by it. It challenges the very trust and cohesion that holds our societies together. It denies our human dignity, and it denies our human qualities if you stand by without doing anything, and that's why we're here. If COVID-19 was worsened by racism, and racism was worsened by COVID-19, to be effective, the strategies to recover from the pandemic need to have actions against racism on their core. And we're not seeing this. This is the call. Recovery packages from COVID need to have racism at their core. We are discussing this with the Global Call Against Racism today and the roadmap. And our panelists that include leaders, experts, practitioners, advocates, majors from our Inclusive Cities Network are joining us to offer their experience and wisdom to carve out the roadmap as a practical strategy to stepping up our common efforts. We look forward to hearing from them. This is a sounding board. We really want to learn from them. Through the roadmap, we want to provide support to member states to enhance the effectiveness of their strategies and policies to fight racism. This should be done based on science and evidence. This is the mandate of UNESCO, and through international dialogue. And we believe that UNESCO is very well placed to provide a setting to upgrade these efforts. We will make a strong call to prioritize investment to those that have suffered from the most in the recovery packages from post-COVID, integrating a strong anti-racism and anti-discrimination objectives. We will make a very strong call to make sure that the public services cover these people, because again, the health coverage was also granted or not, depending on many socioeconomic and racist issues. And we will continue developing campaigns, master classes, and programs all over the world with our field offices and our networks based on UNESCO's mandates on education, culture, science, and communication, to fight biases and stereotypes that remain ingrained deep in the minds of our societies. DG Azoulay mentioned all of the contributions that UNESCO had been making, and we will bring them all together in this roadmap. And as I said, I'm very happy to have ADG Giannini with us, who will present the Global Citizen Education and many of the work that she's doing. But we're also working on the digital technologies. The digital technologies are reproducing these biases and these racist threats, and therefore our recommendations on ethics of artificial intelligence or work on the fight against hate speech in the media from the communications sector, all this is gonna come together to make a common instrument. Our slave road, and of course, the work on intercultural dialogues that we will be delivering with the framework. Such action requires a whole of society approach in order to be transformative. We're fortunate in this regard not to start by zero. UNESCO has a long track record of moral and intellectual leadership in the fight against racism going back more than 70 years. It was actually born with that mandate. Putting peace in the mind of men and women is everything about living together in peace without racism. Let me now mention two of these initiatives that the social and human science sector is advancing to give you a flavor of the scale of our ambition, and we hope that we will count with the support of member states in this very important undertaking. We have begun work on a comprehensive scanning exercise examining existing institutional, legal, and informal frameworks that create opportunities for and barriers to inclusion, and which can help explain the successes and failures of anti-racism strategies. We need to learn together what works and what doesn't. The study will help to build very practical lessons and good practices on why certain strategies are successful and to distill lessons that might be useful for member states. There's no one-size-fits-all, but I think that multilateralism is the right place to start to look at learning together in this journey. We have also started work on an integrated anti-racism policy toolkit, which will provide practical methods to integrate the consideration of racial equity in the design and revision of key policies and programs, laying out the prerequisites for effective implementation, giving guidance for developing clear goals and measurable outcomes, providing methods for strengthening engagement with stakeholders in affected communities, and outlining specific mechanisms for successful implementation and evaluation. Implementation and evaluation, accountability. This is what we call for. In doing so, it will serve as a flexible and adaptable means of mainstreaming racial equity into the structures, behaviors, and attitudes that sits behind these policy interventions. We have our members, we also have the ECAR, you saw them, these fantastic majors that we also have in a panel that will help us to implement this toolkit, develop the toolkit and implement the toolkit, because it will have common ownership. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we're really excited about this forum and the power of UNESCO to change outcomes for good. Let me finish by quoting Elie Wiesel, writer, Nobel laureate, and Holocaust survivor, who put it well when he said, "Action is the only remedy to indifference, the most insidious danger of all." There's no indifference in this room. There's no indifference in UNESCO. We are all bound for this call to action. We are proving today that we are not letting these things happen, and we are going to chart a clear path for action. I wish to thank you for your commitment, again, Ambassador Kim and your country, and the leadership that I'm sure together we will be achieving change on the ground, That is our ambition, and support the so many people that needs it. Thank you so much.
Faced with an unprecedented crisis, life as we knew it came to a halt. Borders were closed, and people closed their hearts. But we are taking care of each other, fighting the challenges together. We are adapting, innovating, and inspiring each other. We are only as strong as we are united.
Well, now we will move into the ministerial panel. And to start this conversation, it's my pleasure to welcome Assistant Director General for Education, Madame Stefania Giannini. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriela, for your warm welcome. Your Excellencies, dear ministers, the important topic of this global forum reminds us to a very inspirational quote from Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. No one is born hating another person. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. And this speaks to the power of learning to dismantle the mechanism of hate and instead to awaken values of respect and empathy. I will focus my short remarks on education. Well, we must be very honest and speak the truth, the language of truth. Racial discrimination still plays out in education, whether in textbooks that don't recognize the contributions of indigenous people or racial minorities, in teachers who hold lower expectations for students of color, in racial biases in school discipline, in uneven resource allocations. This is the real word. The COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically exacerbated inequalities in education, we know, including on ethnic, racial, and linguistic grounds that intersect with poverty and marginalization. In the face of a surge in intolerance and the risk of a hate and exclusion, now is the time for societies to rally around a vision of education that is ethical and transformative. And this is a vision that places education and equal opportunity at the core, at the center, one that empowers learners to act as global citizens. This is a vision of education which requires practice and reaffirmation. The only way to undo racism is to constantly identify it and describe it, and then dismantle it. Education must provide a space for young people to understand the processes that sustain racism and discrimination in order to reject it, to defend a human dignity, and strengthen democratic engagement. UNESCO's Global Citizenship Program contributes precisely to this goal. Together with former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and other leaders, we have embarked on what we call Mission 4.7, a reference to a very specific target of 2030 Agenda, SDG 4, and more specifically in the education goal. It's precisely about providing students with the knowledge, the values, the skills, They need to act for human rights and equality and to build a better society. It nurtures the motivation to act in ways that benefit others and our society and recognize diversity as a wealth. Well, there is no single intervention to eliminate racism and discrimination. It's a political project and the whole of society approach, with education at its most powerful ally. Education systems themselves need to build a real culture of inclusion through training to address implicit biases, new policies, curricula that fully help to understand the past and relationship to the present, and of course, meaningful consultation with communities. Well, once again, nobody is born to hate. Nobody is born a racist. Racism is learned. This is why education is one of the most powerful tools to go against racism. And this is why education is essential to build the defenses against all forms of discrimination. I thank all those champions today here who are ardent education advocates, and for giving me the floor. Thank you very much. And now I present the video from Her Excellency Noura bint Mohammed Al-Kaabi, Minister of Culture and Knowledge and Development of UAE.
Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to take part in this panel at the Global Forum Against Racism and Discrimination organized by UNESCO. I would like to express my gratitude to Madam Director General Audrey Azoulay for the invitation. Thank you also to our dear colleagues from the Republic of Korea for making this event possible and leading the global call against racism, which we were proud to co-sponsor. The UAE is the pioneer in peaceful coexistence. It is home to well over 200 nationalities, with a multitude of cultures, faiths, and ethnicities living together in harmony. Our history as a nation began with a staunch commitment to diversity and pluralism. It was a reflection of that early commitment to freedom of faith that Sheikh Shakhbout, then ruler of Abu Dhabi, donated 11 acres of land for the construction of the first church in Abu Dhabi. When that church was inaugurated in 1965, Sheikh Shakhbout and his brother Sheikh Zayed, founder of the nation, both attended, demonstrating their commitment to these values. We continue to build upon and fully realize that early commitment in the present day. The UAE now has more than 50 places of worship from myriad faith communities, in addition to our many mosques of all shapes and sizes. The UAE is guarding against all forms of discrimination through effective legislation, inclusive agendas, and evidence-based policy. In 2015, we enacted a law to fight discrimination based on religion, caste, doctrine, race, color, or ethnic origin. A 2018 law on equal wages for women and men is another example of how we have been strengthening our legal system to prevent discrimination. We named the year 2019 as the Year of Tolerance to promote nationwide awareness about cultural diversity. The year also saw the announcement of the Abrahamic Family House Project, which includes the construction of a mosque, church, and synagogue on the same grounds in an architectural celebration of diversity, while also emphasizing our common humanity. The announcement of the post of the Minister of State for Tolerance in 2016 was another decisive step aimed at promoting a diversity and fighting discrimination. Our own young history as a nation is a testament to the fact that vibrant diversity of cultures and religion is a source of strength, enrichment, and development. 2 years ago, history was made when the Human Fraternity meeting was held in the city of Abu Dhabi. There, the document of Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living together was signed by His Eminence Dr. Ahmed al-Tayyib, Grand Imam of Al-Azhar al-Sharif, and His Holiness Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church. After the signing together, Pope Francis and Sheikh Ahmed al-Tayyib announced the adoption of a culture of dialogue as a path, mutual cooperation as the code of conduct, reciprocal understanding as the method and standard. This document is guided by the fundamental principles of tolerance that we continue to strive for and build on today. We recognize that the support and promotion of cultural diversity creates a multifaceted ripple effect in our societies. Cultural diversity is the core component of a successful cultural ecosystem. The UAE Culture Agenda 2031, launched in 2018, puts a premium on upholding cultural diversity as a major contributing factor to the growth of a creative economy. Moreover, our talent support policy for the cultural sectors envisions a framework that is dependent on a diversified talent pool for a thriving cultural sector. We also prioritize synergies between education and culture, as these two fields must work hand in hand to ensure that solid foundations are built for diverse societies and sustainable development. Our partnership with UNESCO is a transition of our commitment to coexistence. In February 2018, we became the first country to join UNESCO's flagships initiative, Revive the Spirit of Mosul, for the recovery of one of Iraq's iconic cities. The project is aimed at fostering reconciliation and social cohesion in Mosul through the reconstruction of the old city's historic landmarks, Al-Nouri mosques, its iconic Al-Hadba minaret, and Al-Sa'a and Al-Tahira churches. We were overjoyed when the Pope chose to visit one of these iconic buildings, reaffirming the significance of inter-religious and intercultural dialogue. During these unprecedented times, the UAE remains focused on the protection of coexistence, cultural diversity, and translating these strengths into tangible impact through effective policymaking. UNESCO's mandate and platform provides a unique opportunity for us to work together and build on the momentum of this forum. Racism and discrimination cause immeasurable harm, for the microaggressions in daily life to the turmoil and destruction experienced by many around the world. We deeply appreciate the organization's long-standing commitment in the fight against racism and discrimination, and look forward to working alongside our fellow member states in this mission. Together, guided by documents like UNESCO's Roadmap Against Racism, we aim to discover and explore the new ideas that will ensure the world makes sustainable progress. This will require conversations that are honest and compassionate, and concrete actions that promote respect for diversity. We must identify, understand, and address institutional and social barriers to the attainment of acceptance, cohesion, and the creation of places for all. Thank you all very much for your kind attention, and all the best.
Minister Kaabi, it's great to have this very clear guidance in terms of the honest conversation and the institutional and social barriers for the fight against racism. Let me now give the floor to Minister Olga Sánchez Cordero. She is the Minister of Interior of Mexico and a great champion on the causes of diversity, on the causes of gender, on protecting minorities, indigenous communities. She would have loved to be with us today, but there are 7 hours difference, so it's great to have her message here in this recording. So please, Minister Cordero.
Saludo con mucho gusto a Audrey Azoulay, Directora General de la UNESCO, a quien le agradezco la invitación para participar en este panel sobre políticas contra el racismo. en el cual tengo la gran oportunidad de participar junto con distinguidos funcionarios y funcionarias de todo el mundo, a quienes también saludo afectuosamente. Aprovecho este foro para especialmente saludar a Michelle Bachelet, alta comisionada de Naciones Unidas para los Derechos Humanos, a quien tuve la oportunidad de saludar en persona en esta secretaría. Asimismo también a mi querida amiga Gaby Ramos. La diversidad de los seres humanos constituye nuestro más grande tesoro. La condición humana es, por definición, pluricultural y pluriétnica. Son nuestras diferencias las que se entretejen en el gran crisol de las representaciones que hacen únicas a todas las sociedades del mundo. Por ello, cuesta entender que el racismo y la xenofobia pervivan como grandes males de la modernidad. Durante la historia de la humanidad hemos sido testigos de un sinfín de crímenes y de manifestaciones de odio y de intolerancia, mismas que han dejado tras de sí múltiples víctimas, algunas conocidas y otras tanto que han quedado en el olvido y enterradas en el desconocimiento. Lo anterior parece confirmar la famosa frase de Thomas Hobbes: el hombre es el lobo del hombre, pues aún cuando nuestra naturaleza es la diversidad, siempre hemos querido prevalecer los unos sobre los otros, imponiéndonos una única visión del mundo, yo diría una única cosmovisión, generando nacionalismos rancios y tóxicos y promoviendo odio entre culturas y etnias. Revertir esta situación es impostergable. Los crímenes de odio, el racismo y la xenofobia siguen existiendo en pleno siglo XXI. Tenemos que ponerles fin, pero un terminante fin. Nuestro papel como representantes de nuestros países es generar políticas públicas que promuevan la integración sin discriminación para lograr la garantía tangible de los derechos. Debemos generar, sí, leyes que condenen de manera puntual y efectiva los crímenes de odio en todas sus manifestaciones, pero ante estos no podemos tener ninguna tolerancia. El trabajo conjunto entre organizaciones de la sociedad civil, legisladores, jueces, ministros y gobiernos es la clave para generar sinergias que deriven en acciones claras y contundentes en favor de la inclusión. Debemos construir sociedades abiertas, con mayor tolerancia cultural. Debemos unirnos para eliminar las narrativas que generan confrontaciones a partir de la imagen de enemigos externos. No lo somos. Somos aliadas y aliados del cambio hacia un mundo más incluyente y más igualitario. La construcción y ejecución de una política antirracista requiere de alianzas institucionales con sociedad civil, con los actores involucrados y con el público objetivo. Esto permitirá la evaluación de las políticas que implementemos e incorporar siempre las necesidades sociales y cosmopolitas que ellos persigan. Las y los invito a generar contranarrativas a la intolerancia, al odio, al racismo. Tenemos que crear y acuñar nuevas semánticas que nos ayuden a sensibilizarnos ante los otros. Todos pertenecemos a países con identidades diferenciadas y esa es la riqueza de la humanidad. No basta con ser buenos técnicos o diestros académicos. Necesitamos ser buenas personas universales, tolerantes, incluyentes, empáticos con las necesidades de todos los demás. Creo firmemente que la construcción de políticas antirracistas debe partir desde la voluntad política de todos los gobiernos. De esta forma, lograremos catalizar las estrategias necesarias para atender a todos los grupos poblacionales, especialmente aquellos que históricamente han sido discriminados por sus orígenes étnicos. Por parte del Estado mexicano, cuentan con el compromiso de luchar por la desaparición de la discriminación, del racismo, la xenofobia y los crímenes de odio. La nueva política de Estado tiene como punto central la atención constante a los grupos más vulnerables, como son las comunidades indígenas que sufrieron durante siglos de discriminación sistémica. Nos unimos a esta lucha global por la erradicación de este mal que ha acompañado nuestra historia. Lo reconocemos, pero les afirmo que no permaneceremos con los brazos cruzados en la indiferencia. Estamos tomando acciones firmes y determinadas que acaben con el odio entre los grupos étnicos de todo el mundo. Tendamos puentes y no muros. Como decía Isaac Newton, unámonos en una sola voz por la paz, por el respeto, por la convivencia entre todos los seres humanos. Muchas gracias.
Gobierno de México.
Thank you so much, Minister Sánchez Cordero, for this powerful message. The very first women in Mexico to hold that ministerial position. Now I want to go into the panel and the ministers that will be joining us in this conversation, and I'm really grateful for them to have accepted us in this invitation. They tell me that thanks to the digital magic, they will appear in these pictures behind us. I want to welcome Her Excellency Lindiwe, Minister of Social Development of South Africa. Je vais vraiment donner la bienvenue à Elisabeth Moreno, la ministre déléguée auprès du Premier ministre qui est responsable de l'égalité hommes-femmes, la diversité et l'opportunité et l'égalité de la France. I want to welcome also His Excellency Vendelín Leitner, State Secretary, Minister of the Interior, Slovak Republic. And then again, our dear sponsor and partner in this global forum, Her Excellency Choi, the Chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission of the Republic of Korea. So we have them all here. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to move on this conversation by asking the ministers to state early on in this debate your views about this challenge and how would you tackle it. And I will ask Madame Zulu to start with her comments. Please, you have the floor. Well, no, I'm corrected. I'm sorry, Mr. Zulu. I think that we need to, of course, because of the very great support, I'm very sorry for this misstep. We are going to give the floor for Her Excellency Choi, the Chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission, Republic of Korea, and then we go right after her to you, Minister Zulu.
Yes, 마담 가브리엘라 라모스 사무차장님, 그리고 각국 장관님, 세계 인종차별 철폐의 날을 기념하여 개최하는 인종주의와 차별반대 세계 포럼에 초청하여 주신 것에 감사드립니다.
I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. Yeah.
이 중요한 패널에 가브리엘라 라모스 유엔 사무차장님 그리고 각국 장관님들과 온라인으로 자리를 함께 하게 되어 매우 기쁩니다. 먼저 저는 2020년 인종주의 철폐를 위한 국제적 요구, 채택 이후 인종주의와 차별을 없애기 위한 유네스코 관계자 여러분의 노력을 높이 평가한다는 말씀을 드리고자 합니다. 그리고 앞으로도 유네스코가 인종주의와 차별 철폐를 위한 열정과 헌신을 통해 모든 사람의 마음속에 평화를 만들어내는 일을 성공적으로 해낼 것이라 생각합니다. 그리고 이번 포럼을 통해 유네스코 회원국들이 각국의 모범적 대응 사례를 공유하고 논의를 발전시켜 혐오 표현 근절을 위해 한 걸음 다가설 수 있기를 기대합니다. 사회적 소수자에 대한 차별적 고정관념과 편견에 기인한 혐오와 차별의 확산은 오래전부터 세계적인 문제가 되고 있습니다. 더구나 정보통신 기술의 발달로 혐오와 차별은 시간과 공간을 초월하여 퍼져나가고 코로나19 팬데믹은 사회적 소수자에 대한 혐오를 심화시키고 있습니다. 저는 2018년 9월 인권위원장으로 취임하면서 급속도로 확산되는 혐오와 차별에 대한 적극적 대응이 필요하다고 판단하여 이를 전담할 기구로 2019년 혐오차별 대응기획단을 설치하였고 공론화와 인식개선, 자율 대응 확산, 혐오 표현 대응의 제도화를 3대 전략 과제로 설정하였습니다. 우선 공론화와 인식 개선을 혐오 표현 대응의 시발점으로 삼았습니다. 혐오 표현에 대한 사회적 인식도를 조사해서 결과를 발표하고 혐오 표현의 개념과 해악을 분석하여 혐오 표현의 대응 기준을 제시하는 대중 안내서를 발간하였습니다. 특히 혐오 표현에 대한 대응이 활발한 유럽 각국 대사들과의 간담회를 통해 서로의 경험을 공유하고 대응 방안을 모색하였습니다. 그러던 중 2019년 5월 유엔이 발표한 혐오 표현에 대한 유엔 전략 및 행동 계획은 인권위의 활동에 큰 힘이 되었습니다. 저는 혐오 표현을 근절하는 것은 개인, 정부, 사회, 민간 부문 모두의 책임이고 모두가 행동해야 한다는 유엔의 원칙에 동의합니다. 저는 두 번째 전략 과제인 자율 대응의 확산이 혐오 표현 근절을 우리 모두의 책임이라고 한 유엔의 원칙을 실현하는 것이라 생각하고 사회각 영역에서 혐오 표현에 자율적으로 대응하는 사회적 기반의 확산을 꾀하였습니다. 오늘 언론과 교육령에서 만들어진 모범 사례를 소개해 드리려고 합니다. 한국에서는 최근 국민의 인권 감수성 향상에 앞장서야 할 언론과 미디어가 오히려 편견을 조장하고 혐오 표현을 확산하며 재생산한다는 비판이 지속적으로 제기되어 왔습니다. 언론은 혐오 표현을 촉발시킬 수도 있지만 동시에 이를 예방하는 중추적 역할을 합니다. 이에 인권위는 전국 9개 언론 미디어 단체와 혐오 표현, 재생산에 대한 언론 미디어 종사자들의 자성의 목소리와 어떠한 혐오 표현도 용납하지 않는다는 원칙에 합의하였습니다. 그리고 2020년 1월 7개 항의 준칙을 담은 언론 보도의 가이드라인으로서 혐오 추방 실천 선언문을 채택하였습니다. 또한 학교에서 출신 국가와 가족 형태 등 누군가의 배경을 이유로 한 혐오와 차별의 말과 행동이 생겨나고 있습니다. 인권위가 2019년에 실시한 혐오 표현에 대한 인식조사에 따르면 10명 중 7명 정도의 청소년이 혐오 표현을 경험하였는데 대부분 학교에서 친구로부터 혐오 표현을 경험한 것으로 응답했습니다. 학교는 민주주의, 지속 가능한 포용사회, 평등을 발전시킬 사회적 의무를 지닙니다. 이러한 인식의 공감대 속에서 2020년 5월 저와 전국 17개 시도교육청 교육감들은 혐오 표현 없는 안전한 학교를 만들고 평등을 실천하기로 합의하였습니다. 저는 언론과 교육 영역의 구성원들이 자율적으로 마련한 가이드라인에 따라 혐오 표현의 근절을 위해 실천하는 모습을 자랑스럽게 생각합니다. 한국 사회에서 혐오 표현 근절을 위한 다양한 노력이 이루어지고 있지만 앞에서 제시한 세 번째 전략 과제인 혐오 표현 대응의 제도화는 아직까지 큰 진전을 이루어내지 못하고 있습니다. 저는 정부가 혐오 표현에 대한 대응 의지, 반차별과 평등 실현의 의지를 밝히는 것이야말로 우리 사회의 혐오와 차별 근절에 있어 가장 중요한 기준점이 된다고 믿습니다. 지난 2020년 7월 저는 국가인권기구의 대표로서 정부 주요 장관들로 구성된 사회관계장관 회의에 참여하여 발표할 기회가 있었습니다. 저는 이 자리에서 혐오 표현은 사회적 약자에 대한 차별을 구조적으로 강화하는 문제를 가지고 있어 차별의 해소, 평등의 실현을 통해 해결해야 한다는 점을 강조하였습니다. 저는 정부가 혐오 표현에 반대하고 혐오 표현 근절을 위한 정책을 마련하여 시행할 수 있도록 적극 협조할 것입니다. 혐오 표현의 대응에 있어서 정치인의 역할도 중요합니다. 그러나 인권위가 실시한 조사에서 정치인이 혐오 표현을 줄이는 역할을 하기보다는 오히려 혐오 표현을 조장하는 부정적 역할을 한다고 인식하는 국민이 훨씬 많았습니다. 인권위는 2019년 11월에 국회와 각 정당의 혐오 표현 자정과 예방 의지를 천명할 것과 윤리 규정 등의 혐오 표현 예방에 관한 사항을 규정하고 교육을 실시할 것을 요청하였습니다. 마지막으로 저는 2020년 6월 평등 및 차별 금지에 관한 법률 제정이 필요하다는 의견을 국회에 표명한 내용을 말씀드리고자 합니다. 혐오 표현은 사회적 약자에 대한 차별을 정당화할 뿐만 아니라 차별을 더욱 강화하는 효과를 가집니다. 그렇기 때문에 혐오 표현에 대한 대응은 차별 금지와 평등 실현의 제도화와 법제화를 요구합니다. 아시다시피 국제인권규범은 비차별, 차별 금지의 원칙을 명시하고 있습니다. 평등의 원칙은 기본권 보장에 관한 한국 헌법의 핵심 원리이기도 합니다. 이러한 헌법적 원칙을 실현하고 모든 차별에 대한 일관된 판단 기준을 마련하라는 시대적 소명을 받아 인권위는 2006년 정부에게 차별금지법 제정을 권고한 바 있습니다. 하지만 성적 지향을 차별금지 사유에서 삭제할 것을 요구하는 일부 개신교 단체의 입법 반대에 부딪혀 법안은 국회를 통과하지 못했습니다. 이후 7차례나 국회에서 포괄적 차별금지 법안이 발의되었으나 법률이 제정되지 못하고 있습니다. 이제 더 이상 성적 지향, 성별 정체성을 이유로 평등법 제정 논의를 차후로 미루는 것은 멈춰야 합니다. 코로나19는 우리에게 아픔과 함께 매우 소중한 경험과 깨달음을 주고 있습니다. 사회적 소수자에 대한 혐오와 차별의 세계적 확산 속에서 우리는 인권을 보장하고 차별 없는 사회 구현을 위한 국가의 책무를 다시 한번 확인하게 됩니다. 국가는 혐오와 차별로 인해 훼손되는 가치가 무엇인지 이에 대한 대응의 당위성을 제시하고 사회적 공감대를 이끌어내야 합니다. 국가는 다양성을 존중하고 서로를 동등한 시민으로 대하도록 교육하고 홍보 정책을 강화해야 합니다. 인권위는 국가인권기구로서 혐오와 차별에 대항하는 정책 방향과 대안을 제시하고 국가의 정책을 견인하는 한편 사회적인 역량을 결집시키는 역할을 충실히 수행할 것입니다. 이번 포럼에서 혐오와 차별에 대한 인권 공동체의 모범적 대응 방안을 공유하고 협력 방안을 논의하여 국제사회가 당면한 공동의 도전 과제인 혐오와 차별의 해결에 한 발짝 더 나가는 계기가 되기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner. Very great to have you, Chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission, and thank you for your support, for the government of Korea's support. Now let me turn to the next speakers. I have three wonderful ministers that have been fighting racism, not only in terms of the COVID responses, but also in general. And I want to give you some minutes at the beginning to state what your view is on this issue in general. And then I will go into more, to an exchange on what we can do at UNESCO to address it and to help you with this fight. So first, Her Excellency Lindiwe Zulu, Minister of Social Development of South Africa. Thank you for joining us, and you have 5 minutes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Program Director. May I respectfully salute everybody who is present here today, but also thank the previous speakers and the messages that we got from the previous speakers. Allow me to start from the point from a South African perspective that yesterday, the 21st of March, marked South Africa's Human Rights Day. And this day is grounded on in the Sharpeville massacre that took place on the 21st of March in 1960, where the apartheid police shot and killed 69 people in a peaceful protest against apartheid, racism, and segregation. And then may I also take this opportunity to also quote from our late President Nelson Mandela, who said, "Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by the other." We are a nation, a South African nation in transition. We are a nation that is building the future. We are a nation that is doing everything it can in its power and its capacity to fight racism. I do want to indicate that the government of the African National Congress remains committed and resolute of getting rid of our country of all forms of racism and discrimination. This government has led in the past 27 years, had led us into ensuring that we have got policies and practices that fight racism. But I must indicate that it's not only just about policies and what we think needs to happen as a government. It is about working together with our people so that everybody can be committed, everybody can act against racism and apartheid, which we have killed. And we think that racism also can be removed from South Africa. It is exactly 20 years since the world actually descended on South Africa at the World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerances that took place in Durban. And as yesterday, we as a nation observed the Human Rights Day, and we must be careful not to forget our history and past to make sure that it never revisits us, as Comrade Nelson Mandela said then. This year marks 27 years of democracy and freedom from the draconian rule of apartheid, which ravaged our country for many decades, dividing and separating our people based on their skin color. Indeed, whilst the ANC-led government has made significant strides in bringing about social cohesion and unity amongst our nation, we are still a very long way from realizing that true freedom, especially when it comes to racism. Racism still finds rearing its head one way or the other. And we know that part of the biggest problem also in South Africa is about racism in terms of divisions of social, economic, but the political, of course, we can say that we do have that freedom because people can vote, people can make decisions on which party they want to belong to or no party to belong to. We can say that we've gone a long way in that sense. Our biggest problem is around the ownership of the means of production. It is no secret that the means of production, including ownership of land, is still very much in the hands of the minority in South Africa, which are fundamental prerequisites of economic emancipation. Indeed, since the World Conference that was held in Durban, the world has made some progress in the difficult fight against racism and other forms of discrimination. It is for this reason that we congratulate UNESCO member states for ensuring that the global strategy against racism that was finalized after the Durban conference, together with many of the Durban resolutions, have been kept alive, and UNESCO has been in the forefront in so doing. We have seen many sporting codes coming out openly to denounce racism in sports, for instance, across the globe. We have gladly noted how the business, corporate world, and environment is changing due to the advocacy and activism in the fight against racism. We have also seen few sectors adopting equal pay and equal benefits. Many sectors still lag behind, and the fight, therefore, continues. We as a nation commend the UNESCO for the support it continues to give. In recent years, UNESCO has adopted our fight as theirs in the case of one of our athletes, for instance, Caster Semenya, wherein her natural physique has been questioned and resulted in regulations targeting and discriminating against athletes with similar conditions. We note how you have mobilized the World Medical Association through the work of the bioethics work stream of the SHR sector. We trust that you will continue to stand with us as the case now moves to the European Court of Human Rights. The struggle must continue until all forms of discrimination in our society are completely abolished, whether in sports, in arts, in politics, in the economy, and every other sector. Racism eventually must fall. Our country has struggled with racism and its related intolerances, but remains resolute in the fight. We have in the recent years seen an increase of waves of xenophobia and gender-based violence and alarmingly rising levels of gender-based violence and femicide are shocking even in our very country, to an extent that President Cyril Ramaphosa has called this the second pandemic after COVID-19. As part of our intervention efforts, we have legislated laws with harsh sentences to deter perpetrators, but what we'll see us moving forward is us being united in this fight. These two social ills have proved stubborn and continue to raise the ugly necks within our society, lest we forget what it took us to abolish apartheid system in our country. From our experience, unity, consciousness, activism, and support for victims was what saw us go through, and in these values that we see us through moving forward. And program director, allow us to make this observation about racism and other forms of discrimination on how it mutates in its manifestations. You would have noted that in the past, racism presented itself in explicit form of hate, such as carefree, demeaning name calling and laws whose intent was to separate and oppress. It then changed to a more implicit, and stereotypes were used to perpetuate demeaning behavior. Terms like dirty, noisy, and criminal were used to drive the spread of racism. Today, we hear terms like national interest to justify perpetuation of the same atrocious attitudes. Chairperson and distinguished guests, over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has swept around the globe and affected humanity in that it had no equal or in 100 years. Coronavirus did not and still does not discriminate. The virus itself does not distinguish on the basis of nationality, race, language, or ethnicity. Ironically, some different impacts have been observed though because of the inequalities and differentiation that we as humans have created. As we try to work together to combat the coronavirus, inequality and unequal access to services and resources to deliver service remains a major stumbling block. We must be mindful that the outcome of this struggle is in our hands. Inequality and discrimination may be perpetuated even more deeply, or we can see this pandemic as an opportunity to join hands and deliver a more and just world. South Africa has a strong participatory regulatory framework, which we would like to sponsor as one of the strategies in the fight against racism and other forms of discrimination. We have seen how dialogue and bringing all parties to the table can be beneficial to improve social cohesion. If any tool is to be successfully implemented, it would require buy-in of everyone concerned, development of strategies or regulations or guidelines to ensure socially inclusive policies in the fight against racism and other forms of discrimination. We therefore are ready to support UNESCO in upcoming with practical and actionable ways in the fight against racism. We once again commend the government of Korea for its commitment in this flagship project and against racism as a whole. We wish to thank you and wish to commit ourselves to continued engagement at all times when we are called upon as a country. We are on a march to fight against racism. We have been there. We are going through some of the pains that we feel today simply because some years back, there were people who decided that they were going to pass regulation, legislation, and everything to entrench racism. We are now fighting against that. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. I think that you went really comprehensively to answer the 3 questions that I had for you. So it's great that you did it at once, the terms of what South Africa is doing. Second, what works and what doesn't. And I was very pleased to see that you put the emphasis on equal opportunities because that's where the, as I say, the money is. And then, of course, how you see UNESCO going through it. Because we are 25 minutes before we go to the end, I would ask the following speakers. Je vais commencer avec la ministre, Son Excellence Elisabeth Moreno, ministre déléguée chargée de l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes, de la diversité et de l'égalité des chances de la France, mais aussi le ministre Vendelín Leitner, qui est aussi le député ministre de l'Intérieur de la République de Slovaque, de nous faire cet appel. En première, qu'est-ce que la France fait? En deuxième, quels sont les obstacles, mais aussi les promesses de la stratégie contre le racisme? En troisième, comment est-ce que l'UNESCO peut vous aider? Et comme ça, j'espère qu'on aura un petit moment à la fin pour écouter aussi mon amie Stefania. Et on vous donne la parole, Madame la Ministre. Et aussi, nous reconnaissons votre effort pour la Generation Equality. Nous serons tous là avec vous ce mois de juin. La Ministre, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Madame la Présidente, Madame la Haute Commissaire des droits de l'homme, Madame la Directrice Générale, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs, je tiens tout d'abord à remercier chaleureusement l'UNESCO ainsi que la République de Corée pour l'organisation de ce forum mondial contre le racisme et la discrimination et tous les speakers qui ont parlé avant moi pour vos messages d'espoir. Alors, le sujet qui nous réunit aujourd'hui est éminemment important parce qu'il touche à notre cohésion et à la défense de nos valeurs humaines. Il y a urgence à agir et à se mobiliser contre toutes les formes de racisme, d'antisémitisme et de discrimination car elles sont indignes de nos pays et de notre humanité. Ces discours de haine peuvent séduire et même inspirer de cyniques manœuvres d'instrumentalisation de nos concitoyens. Et l'histoire nous a malheureusement démontré à maintes reprises par le passé les conséquences dramatiques que cela peut apporter. La lutte contre le racisme et contre les discriminations sont des combats plus que jamais contemporain. Et en adoptant l'appel mondial contre le racisme en décembre dernier, l'UNESCO a exhorté les pays membres à construire un véritable plan de lutte contre le racisme et les discriminations. Nous ne pouvons que saluer cet appel et plus généralement souligner cette mobilisation avec les actions engagées en France. Car nous devons rester lucides et réalistes, parce que les époques changent, la haine, elle, s'est installée et elle s'est aussi métamorphosée. Elle a changé de visage, elle a endossé de nouvelles pratiques, mais elle n'a pas baissé en intensité. Et notre devoir à tous, à nous, responsables politiques, mais également à tous les citoyens, c'est de poursuivre le combat avec détermination et lucidité. La lutte contre le racisme constitue une politique publique bien ancrée aujourd'hui en France. Notre arsenal juridique en la matière est très important et les lois sanctionnant les comportements racistes et les discours de haine ont été constituées en France dès 1972. Depuis, pas moins d'une dizaine de lois sont venues enrichir cet arsenal. Et le droit international et le droit européen nous ont également aidés à mieux combattre ce fléau en poussant les États à créer de nouveaux outils. Je pense aux définitions des discriminations directes et indirectes ou encore à la mise en place d'organismes indépendants venant en aide aux victimes telles que prévues par le Conseil du 29 juin 2000 relative à la mise en œuvre du principe de l'égalité de traitement entre les personnes sans distinction de race ou d'origine ethnique. C'est grâce à ces textes que nous avons mis en place nos autorités indépendantes nationales qui se mobilisent aux côtés du gouvernement. Il importe ainsi que partout où il peut l'être, les dispositifs juridiques soient sécurisés et strictement appliqués par la justice. Mais malheureusement, le droit ne peut pas tout. Pour réveiller les consciences et pour que l'accès au droit soit effectif, une palette d'actions, toutes complémentaires, est indispensable. Je pense tout d'abord à la formation et en particulier à celle des acteurs publics qui doivent être exemplaires. Qu'il s'agisse des forces de l'ordre, des magistrats, des enseignants et plus généralement tous les acteurs du service public, il est important qu'ils soient sensibilisés et formés à ces enjeux auxquels ils sont confrontés quotidiennement sur le terrain. Cela passe également par la mise en place de plans de lutte contre le racisme, mobilisant tous les acteurs, qu'ils soient publics, privés, institutionnels ou associatifs, et dotés de ressources suffisantes. C'est actuellement le travail que mène mon ministère pour le futur plan de lutte contre les discriminations que nous adopterons dès l'été prochain. Ce plan, nous le construisons et nous avec les associations et je suis en contact permanent avec elles parce qu'elles nous apportent beaucoup de leur savoir-faire. Demain, je vais m'entretenir avec ces associations par visioconférence dans cet objectif. Et déjà, en 2021, 870 structures locales vont bénéficier d'un soutien dans le cadre d'un appel à projets locaux que j'ai lancé en octobre dernier pour un montant de 2 millions d'euros. En plus de ce partenariat noué avec les institutions mémorielles et les associations nationales pour œuvrer en faveur de la déconstruction des préjugés, ce soutien aux initiatives locales marque la volonté de notre gouvernement d'agir au plus près des territoires pour faire reculer la haine et l'intolérance. Cela passe également par le renforcement des dispositifs de lutte contre les discriminations raciales, afin de mieux traiter les signalements et d'apporter des réponses à chaque personne qui se sent discriminée, pour accueillir la parole et les propositions des citoyens et des associations qui sont engagées sur ce sujet. L'UNESCO œuvre pour lutter contre ce fléau et je veux saluer son action et notamment celle concernant la route de l'esclave, les masterclass contre le racisme et les discriminations ou plus encore les conventions culturelles permettant de promouvoir la diversité culturelle et le pluralisme des valeurs. Parce que la culture est un formidable vecteur pour lutter contre le racisme et les discriminations. Permettez Permettez-moi enfin d'aborder la question des réseaux sociaux, parce que c'est une question cruciale aujourd'hui, une question sur laquelle l'UNESCO se mobilise aussi. Ils sont devenus un déversoir de propos haineux et racistes. Ce ne sont pas des opinions, mais bien des délits qui y sont souvent perpétués, des délits commis bien souvent sous couvert de l'anonymat. Nous devons dès lors être intransigeants sur le racisme et l'antisémitisme décomplexé qui sévissent sur Internet, et ce, d'autant plus qu'ils touchent majoritairement les jeunes générations. Le gouvernement français est décidé à avancer sur ce sujet de manière résolue, mais la réponse ne doit pas être uniquement au niveau national, mais aussi au niveau européen, car comme le racisme, les réseaux sociaux n'ont pas de frontières. Mesdames et messieurs, la France travaillera étroitement avec tous les acteurs pour se doter d'outils efficaces à la hauteur des fléaux que nous devons aujourd'hui combattre. La lutte contre le racisme et contre les discriminations est un combat permanent. Nous y prenons depuis longtemps notre part et nous continuerons d'agir à vos côtés. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, merci la ministre déléguée. Je crois que l'appel que vous avez fait, c'est vraiment en ligne de ce qu'on a entendu des autres participants. C'est la loi, c'est les institutions, mais c'est aussi les mentalités. Et c'est une action décisive avec tous les stakeholders. Et je suis très reconnaissante que vous avez mentionné beaucoup des outils qu'on a à l'UNESCO pour vous aider. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole au ministre Leitner de la Slovaquie. Et je veux dire que la Slovaquie était vraiment, ça distingué d'avoir mis en place des politiques très fortes pour soutenir ceux qui sont plus vulnérables dans la lutte contre le Covid. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, for the floor. Thank you very much, dear Director General of UNESCO, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is my pleasure to be joining you here today on behalf of the Slovak Republic. First of all, I would like to express my country's gratitude to UNESCO for the enduring work that has been undertaken in the field of combating racism and discrimination. We also highly value the important role of Mexico and the Republic of Korea, who managed to mobilize political support worldwide for the adoption of the global call against racism. Especially in the current COVID-19 crisis, we need to stand firm more than ever and resolutely address problems still existing in our societies. Racism is deeply rooted in our history, and sadly to say, it remains in various forms to the present day. Unfortunately, certain levels of racial motivated crimes, discriminatory behavior, and rising tensions between community groups have even been growing since the outbreak of pandemic. I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that despite relatively low numbers of racist or xenophobic crimes in Slovakia, we are well aware that racist and discriminatory sentiments are widely spread in the Slovak society. Therefore, Slovakia strongly supports the elaboration of a roadmap which will provide a guidance not only for UNESCO, but also for member states to strengthen our policies and concrete action. Slovakia is one of the European countries with the largest Roma minorities presentation, which continues to experience various forms of discrimination and general anti-Roma sentiments. The discrimination takes form of segregation mainly when it comes to housing, access to work, or education. Recently, we have noticed an important increase in racial motivated attacks also against other national, ethnic, and religious groups, mainly on online platforms. What we are facing now are much more complex challenges. Impact of social media on public opinion is enormous. When they are misused to spread hatred and violence, they undermine two core pillars of democratic society and equal rights for all citizens. Racist and discriminatory narratives and behavior are universal phenomena. They do not know borders, therefore we all have to combat them together, engaging all sectors of society and in cooperation with other countries. At this forum, I would like to highlight, as a form of good practice in successful policy making, this cross-sectoral approach put in place in my country. At the Ministry of Interior, we have created an inter-ministerial platform with permanent members coming from the civil society organizations, independent institutions, and other expert groups. The Committee for Prevention and Elimination of Racism, Xenophobia, Anti-Semitism, and other forms of intolerance does not only bring all relevant actors to the table, but most importantly, it serves as an expert forum for sharing experiences between first-line practitioners and civil servants, raising and discussing concern, as well as for taking concrete actions. The result of our latest joint effort is the adoption of conceptual framework for countering radicalization and extremism, a national document detailing action to overcome racial discrimination and anti-Roma racism. What was crucial in the preparatory process of this conceptual framework was the ability to openly address these cross-cutting issues, assess limitation, and come to the mutual conclusion on how to best approach the most suppressing intolerance in the country. I would like to say that in the Slovak context, aiming at countering extremism, we also have in mind racism, as it goes hand in hand with especially right-wing extremism. By adopting this document, we made a commitment to fight racism, xenophobia, as well as extremist tendencies fueling intolerance in public discourse. We equally committed to reinforce human rights and non-discriminatory education of civil servants in direct contact with the public. In Slovakia, we have a Slovak government plenipotentiary for Romani communities, equally established at the Ministry of Interior, dedicated to address the situation of Roma community. Recently, the office has prepared a national strategy for Roma equality, inclusion and participation, focusing on 5 crucial areas, such as education, housing, healthcare, employment, and anti-Roma racism, which is the parliamentary comment procedure and will be adopted soon. In addition to these programmatic measures, I would like to share with you concrete projects that we have been running since 2018 in the Ministry of Interior with the financial help of the EU. Its overall objective is to improve access to service for victims of crimes and to establish contact points for victims. Victims or potential victims of crime are thus provided basic information as well as possible mediation and counseling support services in 3 selected areas: social, psychological, and legal. Those contact points are for all victims and help us to improve trust of the public in state institutions. To conclude, I would like to stress the importance of having and maintaining a broad support network of specialists when creating national plans in order to name the obstacles, address the real needs of vulnerable communities, and provide them with adequate support services, especially when it comes to such cross-cutting issues as racism and discrimination are. Thank you for your attention.
Minister Leitner, very impressive the fact that all of the ministers that have spoken have really made a lot of efforts to strengthen up the fight against racism and discrimination in their countries through laws, through institutions, through upscaling the knowledge of these issues. I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, ADG Stefania Giannini, to share with us what do you take up from this conversation. And then I will ask each one of our speakers, you will have 1 minute. It's our intention, and we hope that we will be able to do it. We will work on the roadmap, we will work on the mandates that member states have given us. It would be our intention to have this global forum every year to stay stock where we are. And I want to ask you after Madame Giannini speak that you tell us in 1 minute each, where would you want us to be 1 year from now when we go for the second Global Forum on Anti-Racism and Discrimination? So, Stefania.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Well, I can say that through this very inspiring conversation we heard, we can say that racism and discrimination is not, it's a multidimensional phenomenon, and it requires a multidimensional approach to address it effectively. It's about building a framework based on cultural diversity, including linguistic diversity. I think that UNESCO has a strong expertise and has a value-based and human right-based approach to these issues, and I think that it's the right organization which can bring and carry on this approach. I also think that what we need now is a new strong alliances between different sectors. As ministers underline, describing their own policies at national level is what we are trying to do in the UN under UNESCO leadership. And let me quote the Hate Speech Initiative. Hate speech is very much close to discrimination and racism, because we know that the first, the source of racism always is about language first. And in this initiative, what we are doing, we are putting together media, including social networks and private sector responsible social networks. We are putting together, of course, education systems, and working on new pedagogies, new curriculum development, and policy which can really integrate this racial integrated approach in schools. And of course, we are very much discussing and working with governments. I think Ms. Choi at the very beginning said very clearly that political will and the government's engagement is crucial to put in practice guidelines and action plans that UNESCO and other partners are building on. Okay. So I see this kind of multidimensional approach, a very challenging one, but I think that it's possible to raise awareness, to mobilize public debate, starting with children, youth, and let me conclude telling you that education is a big part of the solution, and thanks for having me in this inspiring global forum.
We will not have expected anything less, Stefania. We know education is at the heart, but you're right, it's the multidimensionality and all of the elements with the cross-sectoral work that UNESCO does that really can touch on different aspects of this. So please, we have 1 minute per speaker, please. Stick to the time if we want to allow the other speakers to tell us where do you want us to be in UNESCO in 1 year time if we celebrate the second Global Forum on racism and anti-discrimination. So we start with the chairperson, Mr. Choi, and then we go again with Minister Zulu, Minister Moreno, and Minister Leitner. And we take note. We can, no.
해서 한국에서의 성과를 같이 공유하고자 합니다. 그리고 유네스코에서 발간한 책자와 또 캠페인은 한국 사회에 굉장히 큰 기여를 하고 있기 때문에 내년에 그러한 성과를 바탕으로 인권위원회가 지금 제기하고 있는 한국의 차별금지법이 제정되는 것을 목표로 하고 내년에 이 경험을 같이 공유하고자 합니다. 유네스코의 남다른 관심과 그리고 좋은 자문을 구하겠습니다. 고맙습니다.
So I'd like to talk about the achievements
We had the translator. We've heard her. It was translated, so it's fine. We got her call on the toolkit to help member countries taking into account the uniqueness of each national context and needs. So we have, thank you so much, Chairperson Choi. Now could I please ask Minister Zulu for your 1 minute?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I will move from what others have said, in particular around the issue of multidimensional approach. That's the first thing. And the second thing for me is UNESCO assisting us in building the strong alliances and then being consistent in terms of advocacy. But I think what is also much more important is about us holding each other accountable, which also includes the political will. So we must be able to working together with UNESCO. We still thank you. Help us create a conducive environment for our citizens and the world. Help us also build a world that is tolerant so that racism and discrimination finally can be completely eradicated, not only in South Africa, but I think in the African continent, in all the continents and the rest of the world. In South Africa, we say we are building a better Africa and a better world. And thank you, UNESCO.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those wonderful words. Minister Moreno, please.
Eh bien, écoutez, j'ai été ravie de participer à ce magnifique panel et ma conclusion serait que nous savons que la Covid-19 a remis l'humain au centre de nos préoccupations et je pense aux femmes en particulier. Et nous savons tous que cette crise exacerbe les inégalités et les discriminations et que personne ne parviendra à vaincre cette crise économique et sanitaire seul. Et c'est pour ça que l'approche internationale pour lutter contre le racisme est indispensable et que l'UNESCO peut nous y aider par ses expertises, par vos institutions et par vos réseaux. Et vous nous permettez, en collaboration également avec la société civile, de nous doter d'instruments, de conventions normatives communes que chaque État doit transposer. Voilà de nombreuses années maintenant que nous parlons de la lutte contre le racisme dans le monde et voilà ce que cette crise nous apporte, c'est une opportunité de remettre l'humain au centre et de faire en sorte que notre monde soit plus juste et plus égalitaire. Merci beaucoup.
Merci Madame la Ministre, vous serez contente de savoir qu'on va avoir aussi un panel sur les gens. Mais vous voulez vous savoir ici, dans le panel ministériel, mais le forum va aussi parler sur la question de genre. Et Minister Leitner, please, the floor is yours. 1 minute to finish.
Thank you very much. A long-term and well-thought-out strategy to combat racism and discrimination is needed. I consider it extremely important to involve all relevant stakeholders to strengthen public understanding of these important issues. UNESCO is a very recognized organization in Slovakia, and therefore it could help us build bridges in our society in all areas of its expertise. A good start would be to share best practices and good, effective ideas in this area. Thank you very much.
with these words, we finished the ministerial panel. We're really grateful on the very impressive guidance that we received. We have very clear marching orders. We will be working on the roadmap. We will be working on the toolkit and also on the scanning exercise and on all the strands of work that UNESCO is advancing on education, on culture, and science. Thank you so much, ministers. Ambassador Kim, you've seen this debate has been fantastic, so we are now empowered to continue working on this very important fight. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon from New York City. My name is Amade Azikwe, and I'm the music director of the Harlem Symphony Orchestra. Along with 4 exceptional colleagues, we are here to lend our voice to the extraordinary gathering today. Artists are often at the forefront of social discourse, and so we are honored to fill that role in such a prominent way and to join you today. We cannot thank enough UNESCO for the invitation to speak with our instruments, the universal language of music. Thank you all for your commitment to positive change. In the year 1946, the 24-year-old African-American pianist and composer George Walker composed the piece that we are about to hear. He dedicated it to his grandmother, who was born into slavery. Dr. Walker was also dedicated to positive change and inspired countless pianists, composers, and musicians in general. Many were his students, but he also inspired and mentored many others personally, including myself. In 1996, Dr. Walker was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Music. The solemnity and passion of this piece is, I believe, an ideal way to express what so many of us feel when we think of what is possible in today's world. Now, as in 1946, we have the opportunity to reflect and to move forward together, sometimes with struggle, sometimes in harmony. Please join me in welcoming my colleagues, Lily Holgate, Yumi Oshima, Tobias Werner, and Liani Mateo, as we perform for you George Walker's Lyric for Strings.
you.